I'm very pleased to be speaking today with Andrei Martyanov, an expert on Russian military and naval issues. Andrei was born in Baku, USSR in 1963. He graduated from the Kirov Naval Red Banner Academy and served in the Soviet Coast Guard through 1990. In the mid-1990s, he moved to the United States, where he currently works as laboratory director in a commercial aerospace group. He is a frequent blogger on the US Naval Institute blog. He's written 3 books: Disintegration, Indicators of the Coming American Collapse, Losing Military Supremacy, The Myopia of American Strategic Planning, and The Real Revolution in Military Affairs. He maintains the blog Reminiscence of the Future and is active on Patreon, and I would highly encourage viewers and listeners to support him there, as well as to follow his regular updates on YouTube. So, Andrei, thank you so much for speaking with me today.
Oh, my pleasure, Emma.
So I really wanted to speak with you because of your vast knowledge and expertise and experience in military affairs, and because I know you are following very closely events in the Ukraine and Russia's military operation there. So I have a variety of things to ask you, but given the events in Donetsk yesterday, I wonder if we could just start with that.
Sure.
I've spent quite a bit of time in war zones, but that said, I don't really know that much about weaponry. So yesterday, the Ukrainian forces bombed the center of Donetsk in the People's Republic with what I've read was a tochka. So can you please explain what happened and the nature of that weapon?
Tochka U is a very old Soviet, well, primarily tactical, but operational tactical sometimes, ballistic weapon. It was widely spread all around the world. For example, Saddam's army had this. It's a basically obsolete system. And the air defense of LDNR, those Donbas republics, which effectively is the Russian air defense, have been successfully intercepting those. With the exception of a few days ago, they did manage to strike Lugansk fuel depot. But this one, which was shot at Donetsk, was also intercepted. The problem was that it was carrying the warhead, which wasn't, single charge of the, high yield explosive TNT, and which would otherwise make the huge crater, in the target which it's going to hit. The problem with that, they were using their prohibited cassette munitions. It's the thing which basically detaches from the, warhead detaches from the main body of the vehicle itself, and then spreads all those. They are kind of like small balls, and those are primarily anti-personnel weapons. They are not designed to break through some concrete blocks or anything of this nature. And that is why it is dangerous. Even when they struck the air defense, intercepted this, at the descent, this Tochka U missile, it was able to detach and spread those explosives all over the area. And as the result, we have 17 people dead, I believe the latest data, and there are like number of people maimed and, wounded horrendously, because it is primarily anti-personnel weapon. It's not a single charge. It's the thing which spreads the basically death over some area, and is designed primarily as the anti-personnel weapon. So, and that's what they did. And the only good thing about it, if there's any good outcome with the computer, which contained, including the targeting data, and provided by NATO and the United States, have been captured. And actually the names of people, the officer and his superior who gave the order to do it, are known, and they probably better run, because they will be hunted down and brought to the War Crimes Tribunal, which hopefully will be set up in Donetsk instead of Moscow, because Russia doesn't have death penalty. But Donetsk Republic and LDNR, Donbass, they have their, death penalty. And many people deserve to be hanged or shot, what have you, because they're full-blown war criminals, and they just pretty much, very recognizable pattern of Nazis,
Yeah. Well, we'll get into the different neo-Nazi battalions in a bit, but I think this just bears highlighting. I mean, obviously, you're aware, I'm aware, but and maybe people who follow both of us are aware that this is obviously not the first criminal act the Ukrainian forces have perpetrated against people of the Donbass. This has been going on for 8 years. Before we get into the fine details of how this evolved, could you just speak a little bit more on other types of prohibited weapons that they've used over the years, and why these are prohibited and the nature?
Well, I believe they use the white phosphorus weapons, and it's a horrendous weapon. It burns through you, and nothing can stop it. It's worse than probably their napalm, and yeah, you just cannot extinguish it. You just have to take it as it is, and their wounds are horrendous, but they used it. But then again, it's really not just munitions, however, I mean, horrendous they are. It's the fact that they have been doing systematic assault or attacks on the civilian areas.
Yeah.
Even now, when, especially if you look at Mariupol, which essentially is being reduced now and the mopping up continues, they use a lot of weaponry on civilians. And one of the things which probably shook everybody to the core, nobody expected for them to use civilians as the human shield to that extent. The scale of it is stunning. It's not only just war crime, it's a crime against humanity. And now that, well, we'll call Russian forces, because LDNR operationally, LDNR militia, so-called militias, they are operationally fully integrated right now with the command and control system of a Russian army or Russian contingent, which is doing the combat in Ukraine. And many of those neo-Nazi battalion people, including some officers and including some higher-ups, have been already captured. It's confirmed. And there will be a lot of talk, and I think so. Security services of Donbass and FSB of Russia, they already have their hands full, including also the investigative committee and Mr. Bastrykin, having their hands full with dealing with the immense number of the war crimes against civilians primarily. And when this war crimes tribunal starts, which it will now 150%, we're going to be treated in the worst possible way to some wowzers, which will make, even SS officers probably, pale in comparison, because what they are committing there is just absolutely horrendous.
Yes, I participated in a press conference, and the things that they were talking about, this is straight out of an Al-Qaeda ISIS playbook, the beheadings, the mass graves, like you're saying, the use of civilians as human shields. That's precisely what was done in Syria to prevent the capture or killing of these terrorist forces. And as for white phosphorus, if I may, I documented the Israel's use of white phosphorus in Gaza in 2009.
Yeah.
Like you say, people don't know how to deal with it, like they're not accustomed to it. They put water on it thinking it will douse it, it inflames it. And it leaves, if they survive, it just leaves horrific mutilation of the
I know, it's horrendous weapon. And there is a reason, munition rather, and there is a reason why it is prohibited, because it's literally, I mean, some kind of demonic thing to do it to people, and again, it's much worse even than napalm. And so, but yeah, Ukrainian forces use it widely.
Yeah. So can we just now maybe step back and say, discuss how we got here? Because again, you being in the West, and I'm sure consumer of Western media, in that you need to know, as I do, the garbage they're putting out there.
Yeah.
I know that like the whole context of the past 8 years is completely missing. So if you want to take as little or as much time to just explain like how we've gotten here and why Russia has started this military operation in Ukraine, that would be very helpful.
The story actually is very, very simple here. And it goes back to the collapse of the Soviet Union. And what many people do not understand, actually, that even during the Soviet times, the substitution of the Ukrainian, which is the Eastern Ukrainian population, even in Kiev, has been ongoing very, intensely by importing many people from the Western Ukraine, which is obviously some of its areas are heavily Banderites. The people who trace their history back to the Nazis, Stepan Bandera, and collaboration to their, with the SS even, well, Stepan Bandera was a cadre officer of the SS, and and you have this whole system, so to speak, which frankly, Khrushchev pretty much laid down the foundation for it when he started releasing and many of the people who committed horrendous crimes in the Western Ukraine during the World War II, Great Patriotic War, as it is known in Russia and the former Soviet Union. And since then, you started this basically penetration and, of this Banderite element into the top government and media positions in what used to be Soviet Ukraine. Granted that there was a lot of things which have been really, how to say, supported by the so-called national policy of the Central Committee of the Communist Party, which of course, and Vladimir Putin actually was pretty correct when he, giving his speech on the eve of the start of the operation, when he very specifically pointed out, that, hey, they gave up a bunch of not only Russian territory, Russian people who were essentially Russian people into the Ukraine. Just to give you another example, Khrushchev, while the secretary, well, at the time he was first secretary, he was a general secretary. Later, the general secretary post was introduced. But while being the first secretary of the Communist Party, even in 1956, in order to bring Kiev to the status very famous Antonov Central Design Bureau of the aircraft, and those famous Mrias, and Antonov, IN-225, IN-124 Ruslans, this whole design facility and this whole own manufacturing plant, aerospace manufacturing plant, have been moved to Kiev from Novosibirsk. Mm-hmm. They just gave it out, then they gave out Crimea, So Khrushchev, who was the first secretary of the Communist Party of Ukraine during Stalin's times, and his wife, they certainly had a very special attachment to this land. And as the result, this was really pumped up to the point of to be, very, how to say it, developed economically and scientifically and culturally and what have you, the separate republic, the sister republic of the Soviet Union. As a result, not only the Banderite underground and Banderite element, which was penetrating the power element in that Ukraine, including by just going and becoming communists, so while remaining the, uber nationalist, Ukrainian nationalist, but they got this idea of the exceptionalism. Mm-hmm. It is very similar to the United States, and that, yeah, here's where very exceptional. We feed everybody. Oh, look at our industry. Hey, most of this industry have been transferred, from Russia proper. And we can go, that's, including the Yuzhmash, the famous Yuzhmash, which was making all those ballistic missiles and elements of the, space program for the, so obviously they thought about themselves as something, and this Ukrainian exceptionalism combined with this heavy Nazi element, really, this created this incredible explosive, mix, which already started to basically manifest itself already in 70s and 80s especially, Even before the collapse of the Soviet Union, they were already saying, and you listen to Mr. Krasinski in 88, still Gorbachev in power. He's talking about that our task is to basically kill all Russians, so just, annihilate them. It's not about like getting independence. It is about just physical annihilations of Russians. Well, he's one of the main ideologues of this movement. And now, once it came together, and Kuchma, who became the first president of the Ukraine, former, no less, general director of the famous Yuzhmash plant, once he became the, after Kravchuk, the first real, president of Ukraine, his famous work was Ukraine is not Russia. That's the book, And that whole idea have been instilled now throughout at least 2 generations. We're looking at what, 92, 93, and they have what, 22. So we have what, 30 years. It's essentially 2 generations. And they truly believe that they are so exceptional, that Russians are subhumans. Many of them do, including even in the east part. That is why people do not understand very often the strategy of Russia, and effectively, including the strategy of not taking eastern Ukraine in 2014, where Donbass, a traditionally Russian land with many Russian people, rose up. You can remember Putin even, asked them not to conduct the referendum on the joining Russia, in 2014, because they wanted to repeat the Crimea. Even there, the reason that was asked not to do this, they still did it, was because it wasn't even Crimea. Even there was a lot of this Ukrainian nationalist element. And the further you go to the west of the Ukraine, the more radical this ideology becomes. And essentially, by 2008, 2009, it was becoming very clear, especially with the Obama administration coming in and bringing on the most radical neocon element into the State Department, and should I mention Victoria Nuland, Robert Kagan? We know all their names. These are people who are absolutely obsessed with Russia, and they hate Russian gods, So, and they wanted to turn Ukraine into this ram, onto this, so to speak, screwdriver into the backside of Russia, and to basically, in the end, as it kind of formed itself and really evolved in the last 8 years, is to also use Ukraine as the Kindle, to start the war in European part and basically separate Russia from European markets. And Ukraine was very happy to oblige, because if you look at dominant ideology, even among those people who Russia now saves, they think that, yeah, they were basically fighting those Mongol hordes of, subhumans, Mongolian, Buryat, Russian subhumans trying to assault the West, and for some reason. And obviously they got it, line, hook and sinker, in terms of this basically fantasy, which is State Department and people and neocons in power in the United States fed them. And only now they probably begin to understand that actually what was happening. And again, the full answer and the scale and the scope of this problem will be given once what tribunals begin to operate. I can guarantee you that. You can quote me on this. That will be a wowzer, because there will be many people already are singing like birds, including from the point of view, we know who Mr. Nalivaychenko, former SBU guy, was, Security Service of Ukraine, who basically was responsible for, he was a CIA asset, and he was the guy, for example, who was starting this program of training the Nazi battalions, by CIA advisors, and he himself being, the asset. So it's all there. It's all remarkably documented. And of course, unlike Syria, and or Libya or Iraq, Russia has a damn good space, satellite grouping and state-of-the-art signal and human intel. And so that is not, the issue of bombing Afghanistan into the, well, they were already there pretty much, but into the Stone Age. But I mean, this is completely different game. And that is why they are so hysterical. I mean, because, and especially now with the biological weapons, de facto being admitted by none other than Victoria Nuland. And that's all just the start. And suddenly we have this perspective, I would say, not completely unusual. I wrote about it, that a war crimes tribunal will not just limit itself to Ukraine. There will be many people who will be indicted, and those people are in Washington, D.C. And that's the totally different game. And they totally miscalculated in terms of the actual weight, Russia's geopolitical, military, economic weight, when they understood that, oh my gosh, you poked the bear, you got the bear, okay? Right. So, and that's what happened. And we have to wait. We have to kind of, while documenting what is going on the ground there. But I believe already the body of evidence which is collected is going to shock the world. Those in the world who will hear it and see it.
And can we just go back to a point you made that in 2014, President Putin, I can't remember how you phrased it, but basically kind of discouraged people in the.
Oh yeah, he did.
Why was he trying to avoid civil war within Ukraine, or what was the reason for that? And the follow-up question is, what would you say to people who ask why now did Russia start the military operation in Ukraine?
Yeah, very simple. Russia wanted Crimea. It was clear, and it's now absolutely made public that the United States was planning to have a Crimea to itself. And eventually the spread of NATO into Ukraine. Russians wanted Crimea only. LDNR, Donbass almost happened by accident, Russia brilliantly took, and conducted the operation of returning Crimea home, and do not forget, Crimean people are not Ukrainians in many respects. These are really Russian people, Russian in ideology, in their cultural idiosyncrasies. They are not, even those Ukrainians who are in Crimea, they are really different from.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Russia of 2014 and Russia of 2022 are two very different countries. Russia of 2014 was only on their, upswing, only beginning to recover its strategic, depth, its strategic strengths, economic strengths, and all that. And there was still a significant influence of the what would be called pro-Western lobby and opposition and things of this nature. So the fifth column was there always. It's still there, but much less influential. So Russia had to do a lot of cleaning and a lot of building in 2014. And of course, LDNR, in some sense, it played the, detrimental role at that time as the world was seen then. But today is 2022, and Russia is a completely different country. And for people who are basically educated in within the framework of the Western economism and modern monetary history, theory, they will not grasp even how huge economically Russia is. And it is just immense. It's much larger economy than Germany, for example. Many people still cannot even grasp this. And militarily, well, yeah, Russia has not only just Russia has a decisive advantage in the conventional weaponry, not to speak of nuclear, obviously, but we all know that United States and Russia are basically responsible for the 90%, around that, plus minus, of the nuclear arsenal of the world. But I am on the record since who knows when, since 2014, actually, when I wrote in my blog that conventionally the United States cannot fight Russia. With or without China, doesn't matter. I mean, no matter what force NATO places in Europe, it's going to be a massacre, basically, and they're beginning to see it right now. But, neither United States nor NATO to have any experience of being under the steady fire impact from the standoff high precision weapons, which they cannot even intercept. And 2 days ago, today or yesterday or today, 2 days ago, when the strike on the only 8 calibers. I think so. One of them was Iskander at the Yavoriv range near Lvov. The message was clear, we can do to you whatever we want and nothing you can do about it, and that is why also this hysteria, because they need to constantly, project this image of powerful, finest fighting force in history, as Obama stated. So how the finest fighting force in history managed to lose all its wars is, just it's the puzzle which nobody can really solve. Okay, yeah, sure, yeah, we'll lose our wars and we're still the best. Okay, fine, but that's the absurd of the present day Western media and propaganda, and there you go.
Yeah, so I do want to get into some of this propaganda and hysteria, but before we do that, could you talk about, just in brief, like how Russia is waging this operation in Ukraine and contrast it to, for example, the US invasion of Iraq or the US bombing of Syria or Afghanistan?
Yeah. There is no comparison. We'll start with this. For starters, all this Gulf War mythology and all that, United States wasn't fighting there, as they love to point out, 4th largest army in the world. It wasn't 4th largest army in the world. It was classic, very backward Arab army. Nothing wrong against Arabs, please, but they cannot do modern combined arms operations. It had the monkey models of this old Soviet hardware, didn't have the functional air defense, didn't have functional air force, which all escaped immediately as the war started, to Iran, no less, and other places. And you had people who are utterly incompetent. So, but United States were given half a year in the first Gulf War to assemble forces without any, with impunity, while continuing to bomb the basically perfect tank country, which is desert, in Iraq, all those people. So, and it's all well documented, and even people in the United States, even military professionals in the United States, state that this is the worst thing which could have happened to us, because we got it so easy. We thought that we are that good. No, it wasn't just because the United States was good, but the problem was that the enemy was so bad. I mean, it was utterly incompetent, and even Douglas McGregor wrote about it. There are many people, so it's not like I'm standing here obvious. Here we have, with Russia, 260,000 people army, which actually was trained, especially its eastern grouping, which is more than 80,000+ people by NATO, including at Yavoriv range. It has the very cruel and very fanatical essentially, it says divisions or brigades, if you wish, which are neo-Nazi, well, they're called battalions. They're really regimental or brigade size formations. So when they say battalions, it's really misleading. It's misnomer. They're much larger. You have this, they had the actual functioning Air Force. They had functioning armor. They had functioning air defense. And not some S-75 old 50s and 60s Soviet complexes. They had the 80s and 90s S-300s, so relatively new. Buka 1, even today, it's a state-of-the-art system. It can do a lot of damage and all that. So you had a real combined arms army. Russia dealt with it. Actually, it collapsed it on the cities within the first week. So basically wiped out the Air Force, wiped out air defense, and continues to basically annihilate the armor. And that was the basically plan to, and everybody knew, it's not like it was any secret. They knew, even NATO instructors and NATO advisors, they knew that United States cannot really, Ukraine cannot really stand up to Russia. So the only last ditch tactics was to counter as much as they can and then collapse everything into the cities. And if you look at the eastern, you look at Donbass, you look at Kharkov, you look at Mariupol, all those cities and conglomerates of the cities and villages are nothing more than fortresses. In Russian, it's called Ukreprayom, which is the reinforced region. And this is like one huge, fortress. And of course, you have to kind of slow down. And especially, the only thing which Russian general staff didn't count, I think, on was the scale of the use of their of VSU, of using civilians as the human shield. It's unbelievable. It is straight out of ISIS playbook, and it's playbook by CIA and MI6. They just, it's not just simply war crime. It is a crime against humanity. And that is why, well, Russians kind of do it as much as they can, save as many lives as possible. And that's it. So there is no comparison whatsoever with any campaign United States ever fought.
And just to be clear for people who aren't aware, and you can expand on this, like Russia, when it encircles an area, it opens these humanitarian corridors. Constantly. And it's not Russia's fault that people are not able to leave. It's precisely what you're saying.
Yeah.
These people being held by Ukrainian forces and neo-Nazis as human shields, prevented from leaving to safety.
Yeah, they shoot them. There are mass graves already have been discovered and documented, civilian mass graves. So, and they don't allow people to move out of those corridors. And many of the VSU, but especially neo-Nazi battalions, regiments, what have you, they've been caught. They try to use civilians and mingle with them and then try to escape, because they understand basically they will be either, they will not be counted as POWs. Mm-hmm. They will be counted as the war criminals, and all of them will go to the war crime tribunal. Some will be executed, others will go for a long time into the sunny Siberia, and so they know what is expecting them, and they better pray that they didn't get to Chechens, once, Kadyrov people, they are now in Mariupol, because these guys, they had it with them, and they just, so yeah, they know that. So fanatics, so what can you say?
And excuse me.
Oh, no.
Can you speak about some of these, some of the most outrageous propaganda we've seen in the last many weeks? Like, for example, there was the whole Snake Island incident.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my God.
Please explain to people what that was all about.
Oh, goodness gracious. Yeah. Yeah, Snake Island thing is absolutely hilarious. It would be hilarious if it wouldn't be, that sad in terms of, yeah, they created those martyrs, none of whom died. They surrendered.
Amongst Ukrainian soldiers.
Yeah, Ukrainian soldiers. They surrendered.
And it was, excuse me, wasn't it like they said the Russians came along and said surrender or die or something like that? And
it's oh my gosh, it's ridiculous. I mean, that is why you cannot take US media or Western media seriously anymore.
Yeah.
And the question, obviously, they surrendered peacefully. You can look up their videos. They've been fed. Those who needed were taken care of in terms of health-wise, and things like that. Now, because they don't understand, well, they saw their fake news kind of fail. They came up today, not today, 3 days ago, with the new one. The Vasily Bykov, this patrol ship which took them in from, Zmyny Island or Snake Island, was sunk or destroyed by, and they show some night salvo of some MLRS, multiple launch rocket system. And this is the first time in my life when I heard that you can, with the MLRS primary Grad, this is what primarily Ukrainians have, which is about, I don't know, depends on the range, can hit the moving combat ships. Because for me, as the military professional, it's the whole thing, explaining how the targeting is developed, why you cannot really shoot the multi-rocket launch systems at the moving naval target. And it is so bizarre. You cannot even really comprehend how to answer this, because it's like the 6-year-old child who completely invented some, virtual world fantasy, fairy tale thing. And how okay, guys, there's no Santa Claus. Okay, just wake up, And that's the issue. Obviously, Vasily Bykov patrol ship is just fine, continues to serve, under the air defense umbrella of the Black Sea Fleet, which is very comprehensive air defense umbrella, and slow flying, easy ballistic targets like, those MLRS rockets, look at the Khmeimim, Russians shoot them just, in droves, at least for a couple of years, at least, So, yeah, it's reasonable. I understand that they need to somehow, well, they hate Russians, it's obvious, well, don't forget. James Clapper thinks that Russians are subhumans, so it's normal for them. And but another thing is they cannot face the reality, as I already stated, going back to the previous question we've been discussing about the comparison between first Gulf War and, guys, it's completely different level. Pentagon never fought any war like this in their life, especially with preserving so much of the civilian life.
Yeah.
Well, look at Iraq, how many hundreds of thousands of people just killed, they went, just blew up Fallujah, blew out Raqqa, blew out everything they could because just, and say, hey, we conquered them. Sure, good luck. How many people died? Civilians. It doesn't matter, so, and yeah, there's no comparison, and they know it. They feel sour grapes. They feel complex of inferiority. And again, listen, you have to, let me put it this way. Initial Russian general staff is older than the United States as a nation. Okay, let's put it this way. So, okay, people cannot comprehend. They are envious, and they feel how the United States declines now, both militarily, economically, intellectually. Some people do understand it, and the more they feel it, the more they develop this complex, and the more they lash out to, to everybody. And Russia is a perfect example. We've been living through last 5 years with the Russia Gate, which was a biggest hoax ever. I mean, it's just incomprehensible. And yet, here we are, and we just hope that Mr. Durham finally gets appropriate indictments. I hope so. But yes, we live in the virtual world here in the West.
And I think another media trope is that, like, trying to claim that the Russian military is decimated and desperate and, seeking help from China or elsewhere.
Yeah, well, China thing has been debunked. Yeah, it's so stupid. While China buys Russian weapons in huge numbers. Yeah, it's ridiculous, okay? And again, let's face it. They discouraged the profession of journalism completely. They are not journalists. They're propaganda mouthpieces with whatever the heck they have the degree in from some college, and they just repeat those tropes and things. They will know pardon me, I don't want to use profanity here, but they do not know what is, the difference between LGBT, and BTG, which is Battalion Tactical Group, which they, by the way, invented. Russia doesn't have BTGs. Russia has battalions, so, but hey, it is what it is. This is what is being impressed on public.
Yeah.
And we just only hope that people like Anders Owens or Tucker get their inroads into this complete mess. It's a cognitive dissonance. It's massive psychosis, actually, and it's so terrifying in the sense that people could be that stupid and that
Absolutely. We saw all this massive propaganda when Aleppo was being liberated, for the entirety of 2016. We saw all this nonsense about last hospitals, last doctors in Aleppo. And then we saw these children being used as propaganda pieces, like the Ban al-Abid in Aleppo, tweeting about Holocaust, World War III, Donald Trump save us kind of stuff. But bear in mind that she's in military besieged Aleppo, which was like without electricity. And even in greater Aleppo, where I went many times before liberation, it was hard for me to get internet. So I wondered, like, what kind of access does she have that she can be tweeting 24/7? in any case,
well, she was in London most likely, the same as the Syrian, human rights or whatever observation group or what have you.
She actually was in Aleppo, but she was, of course, not the one tweeting because she couldn't speak English. But she, her handlers were most likely in London.
Yeah.
But her father was a member of the Tawhid Brigades, a terrorist organization.
Yeah.
And it's extremely ironic that, like, fast forward, Bana has written her memoirs. She's in the UN. She's giving this impassioned speech about how she wishes children could go back to school, and her father was literally a member of the terrorist brigades, occupying schools and turning them into headquarters and preventing kids like Bana from going to school. But so I after all that crazy propaganda and the years that ensued, every time an area was liberated, we saw just a new wave of the craziest propaganda about cats and clowns and etc. And I think we're going to see as crazy propaganda in Ukraine as Russia continues to demilitarize Ukraine.
Yeah, I honestly, it's like, again, how can you even address this, because you have to completely change the frame of reference, because it's like you're talking to people who live in the fantasy world, and you have to speak their fantasy things to even address anything. And we are people who kind of want to live in reality, and you cannot just convey it, except, again, if on the larger frame of reference, which is, of course, the global community and the world, which does not actually buy that much of that. It is very internal thing, when you look at it, and especially in Europe, and Europe always loved, so to speak, Russians, let's face it, it is what it is. And when you look at the level of Russophobia in Germany, it's wow, back to, back to those old times, And United States is somewhat different, and again, we have people like Candace Owens, and we have a bunch of alternative journalists and like yourself, then doing their job, trying to inform people, and many people. And this is actually where the saving grace comes from. In the United States, Americans mostly, many, not all, many have a really serious libertarian streak, and that underlies kind of, the desire to, in general, doubt everything, and that is why it's still there, some kind of communication is possible. But yeah, Europe is, oh my God, it's different. So, and it's very conformist.
So Andrei, just had get back to how things are unfolding in Ukraine with the denazification operation. How do you, I know you don't necessarily like to do like prognoses, like this is how it's going to be in the future, but in general, how do you see, like, after Russia finishes this military campaign, how do you see Ukraine moving forward? Because of course the Western media hysteric notion is that Russia just wants to occupy Ukraine and move further west, and obviously that's not, in my opinion, the case. But how do you see things playing out after the military operation is finished?
Okay, a lot for the West. Let's start with the West. It's my idea. Don't quote me on that. I could be absolutely wrong on that. Okay, and yeah, you are right. I hate those minutia prognosis. Yeah, he will go to the left, she will go to the right, and then in the middle they do some. No, this is. But I think there is a huge factor of Poland and Hungary and Romania for the Western Ukraine. Don't forget, Lvov, Lemberg, it's the Polish city, and if you go back to how Stalin was arranging things, and, so will Hungary go for its own enclave there? Those 100,000 Hungarians already in the Western Ukraine, they already addressed Viktor Orban, just come and save us, defend us. And last time I checked, the Hungarian armed forces were close to the border. Of course, there are Bukovina, obviously, with Romanians having their own plans on that. But will Poland go for the rest of the Western Ukraine? I don't know. They will get on themselves a few million of really crazy, banderistas, and I don't know if Poland will go. Who knows? It's Poland. You will never know what Poland wants to really to do. But in terms of the rest of the Ukraine, first, there are a number of scenarios, which you can do that. But obviously, once the military victory will be decided de jure, not just de facto, with the, remnants of here and there pockets of, VSU trying to counter, and having already no resources, pretty much running out of ammunition and fuel. There could be some kind of confederation, but obviously what will happen, undeniably, the Ukraine will be somehow reconstituted, and there will be new security force, mostly police and military police, and force enough to fight the counterinsurgency, which will be formed. And once the constitution of Ukraine will be rewritten, with it proclaiming the neutral status, Russia will help, obviously, in terms of the maintaining the western border secure. Nowadays, it's not that difficult, really. And we might see them, once their shell shock goes away, it will take probably several months for the Ukrainians. Many of them still, as I already said, they're exceptionalists. They think that Ukraine is the best thing ever, and that those Russian hordes of, subhumans, attacking and we're defending Europe and all that. Once this shell shock kind of subsides, and this is addressed like it is being addressed now in Melitopol, for example, or Berdyansk, there is nothing better, better weapon than Russian pensions and social payments to the. I'll give you an example, and this is not some kind of the urban, rumor or urban myth. In 2014, when Russia finished basically of taking Crimea, then the operation was wrapping up, and there were obviously many military people from Ukraine, from VSU, who said, yeah, we're going back to Ukraine, screw you, the Russians just go to hell. And this is the fact. It's not like, and so obviously there were many people who were like serving in the Black Sea Fleet Hospital, Naval Hospital. I was there. I once ended up there, so. And they were setting, getting on the train. And then somebody, while they were still moving from Sevastopol to Simferopol, and then, just taking them to the buses, or somebody would want to fly out, they started to basically give their pieces of paper, which were given the pay rate of the Russian military doctors and nurses. And boy, let me tell you, those trains got emptied pretty fast, and everybody decided to go back and say, hey, we take our oath to Russia and we're good, guys. That's and guess what, very much similar process will start there. Does it mean that they will do it for the sake of their conviction? No, Russians don't care. As long as you serve, and do your functions, sure, we will put other people from Donbass who are doing this by convictions, who will help you to get it right. So in this particular case, Russia, the max what will be there for a while will be a police force, So, and the rest of it, they know better than us, better than me, the Ukrainian psychology and the idiosyncrasies. And I'm pretty sure there are very competent people who know what they're doing in terms of the denazification. Nothing denazifies people better than going back to the stable civilian life. After that, you deal with the most radicals, you kill them, or, yes, per the West, it's not Afghanistan. It's not 1979. It's 2022. And that's what I'm talking about. People have to understand in what paradigm, technological paradigm do we live. You don't even need to put some bodyguards anymore. If you have a good UAV, or Russia can provide many good UAVs, you can basically deal with the border guards, defense of the border just fine, So it's not like this anymore, this incredible World War II scenario. So those problems are definitely being discussed, I'm sure, in general staff. They will be discussed in Kremlin. They're being discussed in Donetsk and Lugansk. And so there you go. So, and even the fact that Zelensky begins to now constantly offer that we don't want the NATO anymore. Obviously, Zelensky is nobody. It's United States talking. It's United States talking. And the war is not between Russia and Ukraine. Well, it is in Russian-Ukrainian operational terms, but it is the war against the West. It's the war against the United States. And Zelensky is merely a puppet here. You know, he needs to do the role, and he needs to basically verbalize the position of the United States. And Russia knows that the United States is not governable. You cannot deal with anybody in the United States. You cannot sign the paper or treaty or anything. Although Russia does say that, hey, paper guarantees will be nice, but we have to look at this whole situation, this whole war, as a much more global, you know, conflict between Russia and the emerging Eurasian colossal economic market, and the, you know, basically declining Atlanticist civilization, which is, well, basically look at Europe. It's terrifying, actually, you know. United States is bad as it is now. I don't recognize the country I love, and you know, we moved to almost 30 years ago, but it's different country. It's unrecognizable. And there you go.
So I just have a more personal question for you. As a Russian living in the U.S., I know that there has been, and this is a deliberate campaign of increased Russophobia, Russia hatred, stoked by the big tech, you know, by Facebook, you know, and by Western media. And like some of the things I'm hearing about Russians being attacked or stores or businesses being closed or et cetera, et cetera. Are you facing any of this in the US?
Don't forget, I am a full-time writer. So if I go out, I go to a restaurant or something like that, or grocery store, I don't feel it. But my wife sends some, she works in the organization. She sends some people don't like to talk to her, but generally speaking, we don't feel anything of likes. And of course, I applaud Candace, you know, Owens for her stance. I mean, this is, you know, just admirable. You know, this girl, I mean, combination of beauty and brains, you know, when she stood up for Russians, you know, and a few days ago, you know, and stop hating this, you know, so that's important. So, and Americans are less inclined to this, you know, it's a complex dynamics in the American society. And you absolutely correctly stated that big tech, so to speak, which is not really tech, it's a bunch of the software coders, basically, you know, and many of them are from Ukraine. I have the photo of the Facebook moderators team with Ukrainian flags. What do you expect?
Yeah.
So yeah, and the fact that how United States policy have been Ukrainized. As much as I don't agree with the Quincy Institute, which, you know, Andrew Basevich and Daniel Larison, they really, I do not believe them, but even they posted the article about that Ukrainians and Ukraine beat Saudi Arabia, which is the largest lobbyist in Washington, D.C. They beat Saudi Arabia several times over.
Wow.
That is, so this is amount of messages, and to U.S. congressmen, senators, you know, they just flood it. Then you begin to look. It's like, I love Pink Floyd, okay? I love Pink Floyd, obviously. And then obviously David Gilmour, and, you know, who doesn't love his music, you know? And then he suddenly pulls his, you know, streaming from Russia. Well, I don't think so many people, it will be affected because obviously you keep the records. But, and I like, yeah, he is, you know, man of art, you know, he not supposed to be getting into the political things and this nature. And then people say, oh, didn't you know his daughter-in-law, she's Ukrainian? It's like, oh my gosh. It's like, you just, whenever you go, they are there. You look at Canada.
Yeah.
Canada foreign policy is held hostage by Ukrainian community there.
Yes,
They
yes.
are not free people. They have their goddamn granddaughter of the SS guy,
Yeah.
their foreign minister. What do you expect, And that is why it's just, well, they will do nasty things, obviously, but I know that Americans are much more complex than Europeans. Americans, they have this contradicting streak about them. So, and that's what I can say about it.
Well, and just I'm going to wrap up, but I wrote it down somewhere. I don't want to misquote you, but anyway, you were talking about like a return to stability in Ukraine, and I think it's worth reminding people that this is not solely about Ukraine's threat to Russia or NATO's threat to Russia and Ukraine's bombardment of Donbass, but the people within Ukraine themselves subject to these fascists, for the last 8 years. So if people are putting their "I stand with Ukraine" hashtags and photos, like they should also be thinking about what about the Ukrainians within Ukraine, whether they're journalists or normal people who just don't want to be ruled by neo-Nazis and are being tortured, imprisoned, assassinated. Like, do you stand with those?
People are scared. Many Ukrainians are scared. We don't know what many of them hold inside. They need to be proven that the regime is gone.
Yeah.
Now you can go and unravel. Now you can go and state your mind. Those idiots in US media and those artsy, as Ricky Gervais correctly stated, they attended less school than Greta Thunberg, who just do those. That's one of the greatest monologues of all time. And they have to understand there are many civilians, Ukrainian civilians who have been killed. And some of them have been tortured, many, and effectively repressed. But then again, State Department, they really love them neo-Nazis, so it's like, but then again, I mean, how can you even deal with those people? They are absolutely, first, they are incompetent, both militarily and in terms of foreign relations and international relations. And secondly, they just are driven by hatred, and so that's the thing. For them, those, United States is ready to fight to the last Ukrainian, so they fight Russians to the last Ukrainian. There you go. And for them, Ukrainians are just pawns, as are Russians.
Yeah.
So.
Well, Andrei, thank you so much for speaking with me today. I really appreciate your insights and your commentary, and I really encourage people to follow your Patreon, support you on Patreon, read your blog, buy your books, and follow you on YouTube and the other platforms, which I will post links to, because you have a very well, you have a deep analysis, but also a very accessible commentary that people can stand to learn quite a bit from. So thank you.
I really appreciate, and pleasure being with you.